Jimmy Carter flashed his familiar smile when he arrived at the small polling center in Plains. "I feel confident," Carter said. "I think we've adequately presented myself to the American people, and I'm perfectly willing to abide by their judgment." Carter took a full 5 minutes to vote. When asked who he voted for, Carter grinned and replied, "For Walter Mondale," and his running mate. The president and Betty Ford were up with dawn. There was a morning motorcade from the hotel to the elementary school in the president's home district of Grand Rapids, where the two voted. Mr. Ford seemed optimistic but relaxed. "I feel very good," he told reporters. "November 2nd is going to be a good day." The president will test that prediction tonight in Washington, where he, Betty, and his family will watch the vote come in.
The Founding Fathers came up with the idea for an electoral college. Some say the framers of the Constitution didn't think the general public was smart enough to handle it. It's since been questioned, debated, and called a lot of names. But despite all that, the electoral college has the final say about who's president, and they could go against the popular majority vote.
Good evening again. I'm Harry Reasoner, here with Barbara Walters and Howard K. Smith. Right now, at this stage of the election night, a little after 10 o'clock in New York, 29% of the precincts in this country have reported, and Jimmy Carter holds a 52% to 48% lead over Gerald Ford in the popular vote, 12.5 million to 11.75 million. Howard has a new projection on one of our states, I believe.
State of Louisiana. ABC News projects that Carter has captured Louisiana by a comfortable margin. That comes to me as a surprise, partly because I've lived there a lot of my life, was born there. It's a very conservative state, the most unpredictable one. It's voted Republican or the third-party candidates for a long time. And the governor was lukewarm for Carter. His wife was outright for Ford, so it's a surprise. But we'll talk about that later.
Right now, that in the electoral vote column, according to our projection, means that Jimmy Carter has now accumulated 197 electoral votes out of the 270 needed for nomination, or for election, and Gerald Ford has 61. Noting, as we have throughout the evening, that it was expected that Jimmy Carter would have the early lead in electoral votes, and that doesn't necessarily mean it won't be a close night. In fact, all indications are it will be a close night.
Well, the reason I'm rocking, Harry, is because that's the only way to keep warm. As you can see, the crowd that Jimmy Carter drew here earlier this evening is staying on. Indeed, Plains is about 10 times its normal population just now. And they are choosing to accept every ray of hope as an absolute definite omen that their man will win. I have with me Billy Carter, the man's brother, and his eyes are a little red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but aside from that, how you doing, Billy?
Fine, Jim. I thought I told you earlier, tomorrow's a national holiday in Plains for Carter's Warehouse, Carter's Farm, Carter's Service Station. We're closing down. It's paid holiday for everybody here. Because Jimmy Carter's going to be the next president, no doubt about it.
You're pretty sure of that?
I'm sure of it. It's better every minute.
Billy, what about this crowd?
I think it's a great crowd. How in the hell they got the Plains, I'll never know, but they're here.
Come from several other states, of course, but are you interested now in seeing about what plans can be made for Plains' future in the event this all comes about?
I would like to be, but I think Plains has already gone to hell. I'm going to let it go.
Okay, well, you heard it straight from the man. He runs a filling station and the warehouse and all the rest of it. You'll just have to check with him later. Jim Kincaid in Plains, Georgia.
Thank you, Jim. Plains, I think, would take either victory or defeat calmly tonight. It's a town that is pretty hard to shake up.
We have some very interesting analysis here of some of the key groups in the population who voted very differently tonight from the way they have in the past. First, two that didn't. The black vote now is firmed up to an 81 to 17 point Carter lead. That is substantial. They didn't turn out in bigger numbers, but gave him a very handsome majority. The Spanish-speaking, 70 to 29%, a very big lead indeed. However, among white Catholics, we find that Ford is ahead 50 to 49%, and that's a big setback for Jimmy Carter. He just somehow never sold himself to the white Catholic group. An interesting one, and we've now got nearly all of the Jewish precincts in, Our count shows 54 to 44% for Jimmy Carter. That is not a good showing by any standard here.
It had been said earlier that if more than 55% of the vote came in, that Carter would probably win, and if less than 50, that it would go for Ford. At least that was one of the discussions that pollsters were taking. It seems now that the voter percentage has been about 56%, and that's equal to the number 4 years ago. So it hasn't been a great voter turnout, but it hasn't been very bad.
The predictions they were making at some point during the summer that would be the lowest voter turnout since Calvin Coolidge was elected in 1924 is certainly not held up.
No, Ford has got to win almost all the remaining states to make it.
Almost. 160 to 257, according to ABC's projection. Wisconsin, which is, well, I don't know whether it's leaning toward Carter or not. It's giving him a 3% lead with 72% of the precincts in. Would give him 11 votes, which would bring him to 258. And then it could be either Hawaii or Oregon, or a small state could bring it.
Bill Werdum is now at Carter, at the ballroom where Carter is in Atlanta. Let's go to Bill Werdum. Bill, can you hear us?
Well, I don't know whether you can hear me here in the World Congress Center in Atlanta. There's a huge crowd, 25,000 strong, we are told, waiting here impatiently for Jimmy Carter to come in here and make what they confidently expect will be his acceptance speech. The crowd is somewhat subdued now, although you can hear music playing in the background by a rock group and a country western group that have rocked the foundations of this great hall. But as I said, the crowd is somewhat subdued because they've been here at least 6 hours. It has been a long night. It is being a long night.
With those 11 electoral votes, I think Barbara has an important announcement.
Yes, I do. In the state of Hawaii, with 4 electoral votes, those votes have gone to Carter, and that does it. ABC now projects Carter is the winner with 272 electoral votes. We had wondered which one of us was going to make this announcement. It was the one who got the last projection, and it's the 4 Hawaii votes that, on our count, has put Carter over the top. By our projection, James Earl Carter, the next president of the United States.
You know, that Hawaii vote is not surprising.
That is Miss Lillian, the 78-year-old mother of the next president, listening probably to so many well wishes, people applauding her. She has said that she will continue to live in Plains. She said earlier tonight, I'm just a hick, but she's a hick with a son who's going to be president of the United States. There she is. You can't keep Miss Lillian down for too long, though. Became a Peace Corps worker, and was 78 years young, a very happy woman tonight. She's been wearing that T-shirt, obviously, under her coat almost all of the evening. It says Jimmy Carter in 76.
Because you're my folks, and you've been with me all the time, and I'm sticking with you. And who's going to stay till Jimmy comes home? Thank you, thank you, thank you. I tell you, I don't think I'll be at the White House much. But in case I am and y'all come, I'll know who you are. My granddaughter.
His biggest victory was in New York, 41 votes, and that's, of course, the state that is possibly going to be contested by the Republicans. There's been a court order issued to impound voting machines in New York City because of suspicions that there may be something wrong with them. He also took Pennsylvania with 27 votes.
In a way, that's remarkable, Harry, because the worst demonstration against Jimmy Carter was at Scranton, Pennsylvania on the subject of abortion. So he was worried about Pennsylvania.
Well, he took Texas with 26 votes. That took a long time to come through, but in the final way that the popular vote is going there, he's winning by a strong 7% in Texas. He took Florida.
And Florida was predicted that it would go for Jimmy Carter, but it was one of those states that could have gone to Ford. And Ford sure would have wanted to have that, but as we see, it did indeed go to Carter. It is Jimmy Carter, 52-year-old Jimmy Carter, whom ABC projects as the next president of the United States, father of 3 sons and 1 daughter. We're going to see a lot of that now. 9-year-old Amy, she was 8 years old when we first began to pay very close attention to her. By 272 electoral votes, 2 more than he needed, Jimmy Carter projected as the next president of the United States. Well, Jim Kincaid has been lounging around in Plains, Georgia, having a very quiet, soft time, but I'll bet it isn't quiet and soft there right now. Jim, you're not lounging at this moment, are you?
Not at all. Miss Lillian, I suppose I don't have to ask you how you feel. You're going to tell me, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, I feel wonderful. I've been through so many wins and losses tonight, I'm just sick. I'm just so glad he had last his run. Everybody here is so happy, because I'm the happiest mother in the world right now.
You've been up a long time, Miss Lillian. What do you plan to do the rest of the evening?
Go to bed, I hope. I don't know. I'm going to stay here till Jimmy comes.
Miss Lillian?
Miss Lillian, Barbara would like to ask you a question.
Yes, I'd like to ask
I don't hear a thing.
Miss Lillian, can you hear me?
I heard a thing.
She can't hear me. Jim,
Barbara,
can you
Miss
hear me?
Lillian is unable to hear you.
Jim, suppose I give you the question.
Okay, fine. I'll relay it.
All right. Would you ask Miss Lillian if at this point she has talked either to her son or daughter-in-law? Has she had any communication with them?
Have you talked to either Jimmy or Rosalind?
No, my sister called me about 2 hours ago and told me that Jimmy told her to call me. But said he'd be late getting home, but he said wait for him.
Do you expect to be here when he gets back?
Yes, I do.
You're going to stay down here?
Oh, yeah. If anybody does, I will. I haven't heard a thing. You hear me there?
Can't hear a thing. Well, the nation is hearing you, Miss Lillian.
Right. That's all. That's all that matters.
Perhaps we'd like to hear about your plans once your son has moved into the White House.
I love you, too. I can't... well, I'm going to stay in Plains. The rest of my life, I hope. I'm tired of traveling. And I hope I never do have to help anybody else in a political race. And I won't unless it's Jimmy.
Thank you, Miss Lillian, very much. Barbara?
Thank you, Jim Kincaid. That's Miss Lillian, the 78-year-old mother of Jimmy Carter. Rosalind Carter's mother is also living. She's 70 years old. Miss Lillian has said that she's going to help her son take care of the problems of the elderly.
The scene at the old train depot in Plains, Georgia, election night, 1976, just moments after the Carter clan learns of Jimmy Carter's election. And there, another colorful member of the Carter family, Brother Billy.
One thing I can't understand about the networks, when 1% of the vote in for Ford, they predict the winner. When 93% in and Jimmy ahead, they can't predict one.
They made it stay up for a long
time.
Good evening. Shortly before dawn, Jimmy Carter reached the end of his improbable 2-year, half-million-mile political quest and won the presidency. Late in the morning, President Ford conceded Carter's victory. Bob Schieffer reports.
By 10 o'clock this morning, he had concluded it really was all over. He called Carter, and an hour and 15 minutes later, his family with him, Gerald Ford came to the White House press room to make the first concession statement of his political career.
It's perfectly obvious that my voice isn't up to par, and I shouldn't be making very many comments, and I won't. But I do want to express on a personal basis my appreciation and that of my family for the friendship that all of us have had. And after Betty reads the statement that was sent to Governor Carter by me, I think all of us Betty and the children and myself would like to just come down and shake hands and express our appreciation personally. Let me call on the real spokesman for the family, Betty.
It's been the greatest honor of my husband's life to have served his fellow Americans during two of the most difficult years in our history. The President urges all Americans to join him in giving your united support to President-elect Carter as he prepares to assume his new responsibilities. I'd like to read you the telegram the President sent to President-elect Carter this morning. Dear Jimmy, although there will continue to be disagreements over the best means to use in pursuing our goals, I want to assure you that you have my complete and wholehearted support as you take the oath of office this January. I also pledge to you that I and all members of my administration will do all that we can to assure that you begin your term as smoothly and as effectively as possible. May God bless you and your family as you undertake your new responsibilities. Signed, Jerry Ford. Thank you very much.
In January, Mrs. Ford says they will return to their home in the Virginia suburbs where they lived before Mr. Ford became the first unelected president. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, the White House.
And in January, the Jimmy Carters of Plains, Georgia will move into the White House. But Plains still is home, and it was there the man who will be the 39th president headed with his victory. Ed Bradley reports.
Any way you looked at it, it was a long night, and by the time the Carter campaign returned to Albany, Georgia, 9-year-old Amy was asleep in her father's arms. But the president-elect's hometown was wide awake, and Billy Carter was at the head of the line saying to his brother, "I guess I can still call you Jimmy." They'd been up all day and partied in the street all night, and if ever there was a hometown boy who grew up, made good, and never forgot the home folks, it was Jimmy Carter. And if ever there was a mother proud of her son, it had to be Miss Lillian. And at this proudest time in his life, Jimmy Carter was home again in this almost make-believe town with people who have meant so much to him.
I came all the way through 22 months, and I didn't get choked up until I... Until I turned the corner and saw you standing here, and I said, people that are that foolish, we could get beat, right?
Through the long night, the Carter staff had remained confident, but their apprehension and concern grew as his electoral vote total stood for hours just short of a majority. Across the street at the World Congress Center, 25,000 people inside and another 15,000 outside had celebrated all night, but it was nothing compared to the moment of victory. During the campaign, Carter was a candidate who made few excuses, but back home in Plains, he generously shared his success and apologized for the long evening.
I had the best organization any candidate ever had. Had the best family any candidate ever had. Had the best home community any candidate ever had. Had the best supporters in my home state any candidate ever had. And the only reason we were close last night was because the candidate wasn't quite good enough as a campaigner. But I'll make up for that when I'm president.
In his first official act after acknowledging victory, Carter returned to the now familiar train depot to thank Mr. Ford for his statement of congratulations and offer of cooperation.
One of the very first tasks facing any new president is the unification of our country after a close and hard-fought election. President Ford's characteristically gracious statement today will make that job much easier for me.
Jimmy Carter's major concern now is the transition. In a typical Carter blueprint, his transition staff has been working since the Democratic convention on this changeover in government. They've compiled a long list of people to be considered for cabinet and other positions, and Carter campaign manager Hamilton Jordan said there will be a lot of new faces in Washington. Some of them will be experienced with well-known names, but most will be people you've probably never heard of.
It's clear that the true problems of our nation are much deeper than gasoline lines or energy shortages, deeper even than inflation or recession. So I want to speak to you first tonight about a subject even more serious than energy or inflation. I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy. Is nearly invisible in ordinary ways. It is a crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. In a nation that was proud of hard work, strong families, close-knit communities, and our faith in God, too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption. Human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns. This is not a message of happiness or reassurance, but it is the truth, and it is a warning.
That's gotta be it. That's gotta be it. That's gotta be it.
We might not see you again because I have to go home pretty soon.
No, I won't see you because I'm going to leave real early in the morning.
All right. You gonna stay at night home?
I hope so. I ain't been to bed since Saturday night.
Yeah. I won't see you.
Okay, but I'll see you when I get back. I love you too. Be sweet.
How you feel? Good to meet you. Hey, NBC over here.
I'm glad to see you.
Can we be right? This crowd that is our friend.
All three were emotional, but they weren't sad. Every single one of them, including coming back to Georgia, is a happy experience for me, and I thank God for it. They are prisoners no more, and they are coming back.
here. And I search for you without any clues. Yes, a man's gotta do what he's gotta do. Oh, how I know it's gonna show. I've never traveled this road before. Oh, how I know I've gotta pay. If I never left here, you might have stayed. If I never left here, you might have stayed. So I call to you underneath my breath, my tongue so tied the words come out. To the heavens here, I need you near. One day I hope we might find